Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Minnesota Conversation on Board Diversity for 50/50 Women on Boards. I'm Maureen Brenner, and together with Wendy Porter, we are proud to co-chair the second Minnesota event for 50/50 Women on Boards. We're thrilled to have you all join us today for our in-depth conversation on how to lead our way to a diverse and gender-balanced boards. Would like to start by giving you a little bit of background on Wendy and I. We both have extensive experience within big corporate here in Minnesota. I have 25 years of corporate experience across two iconic Minnesota companies, 22 years at General Mills and 3 years at Land O'Lakes. I served as corporate vice president, where I led P&L growth for some of America's best known brands, such as Betty Crocker, Pillsbury, and Yoplait. Currently, I'm an advisor for a medtech startup providing strategic marketing insight and brand building expertise to the CEO and its board. Wendy comes out of United Health Group, where she headed up events on the Medicare team. In 2015, Wendy launched a nationally award-winning experiential events management agency called Wendy Porter Events. She also serves on the National Board of Directors and is vice chair of the Government Affairs Committee for the Live Events Coalition, where she's been lobbying Congress for the last 18 months for targeted economic relief for the live event industry during the pandemic. And she recently accepted the position as the Chief Events Officer at St. Olaf College. I'm super grateful to be working closely with Wendy.
Thanks so much, Maureen. And I'm super grateful to be partnering with you as well this year. And hello, everyone out there. Welcome. Before we begin our conversation today, we'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. First, please say hi in the chat to let others know that you're here. And secondly, as we present today, if you have any technical glitches, please email events@5050wob.com and they can assist you. So let's get started.
Sounds great. Well, let's start with our mission at 50/50. 50/50 Women on Boards is the leading nonprofit education and advocacy campaign committed to advancing gender balance and diversity on boards. Our Minnesota Conversation is one of 30 occurring across the globe. Today, we are among women and men who are interested in advancing to leadership positions, including a seat in the boardroom, and business leaders who want to continue to accelerate gender balance and diversity on both private and public corporate boards. We have an occasion today to create opportunity and access for women and people of color in our community, as well as build sustainable impact. And it is truly an honor to be with all of you today. Global 50/50 focuses its work behind 4 key strategies. First, to educate women on how to prepare and pursue a private or public corporate board seat. Second, to advance for diversity and gender balance on boards. Third, collaborate with like-minded organizations and action groups committed to the mission. And lastly, report on the gender and diversity progress of the Russell 3000 company boards, which tracks the largest US traded stocks.
As many of you know, 50/50 is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, so we are dependent on sponsorships to operate. We would like to extend a big thank you to each and every one of our generous sponsors for their support of today's event. Our global sponsors are making it possible to engage literally thousands of participants in this work around the globe, and you can see those companies represented on the screen. More locally, our platinum sponsor is 3Bridge, a local consulting partner guiding Fortune 500 partners through critical change. Our gold sponsor today is 3M, a global powerhouse applying science in collaborative ways to make lives better. And our silver sponsors today are TripleTree, a leading investment bank and principal investor that creates opportunities to fuel innovation and growth in the healthcare space. Our second silver sponsor today is Central Packaging and Display, which has over 60 years of consumer and business packaging experience and delivers much more than packaging. And our third silver today is Prime Therapeutics, who helps people get the medicine they need to feel better and live well. Our generous partners today include Rock What You Got, a social enterprise elevating female voices to spotlight them in events and productions, and MCN6, a Minnesota community network whose mission is to produce and stream Minnesota-made content in support of building strong, diverse communities. We are grateful to be broadcasting from their studio today. Thank you again to each and every one of our sponsors. We'd also like to thank our amazing team behind us, the Minnesota Leadership Committee. These fantastic leaders in the Minnesota community have put in many hours to assist with securing sponsorships, driving our campaign awareness and engagement, and even managing our local event broadcast here in Studio MCN6. Our event today has 3 key parts. We will begin with the annual research, which was recently completed by 50/50 Women on Boards. Secondly, we will move into our VIP panel with our esteemed business leaders and experienced corporate directors who will discuss techniques used to secure a board position and provide advice on how to bring more diversity to corporate boards. And then the last part of our time together will be breakout sessions. When you each registered, you selected a breakout room based on your career level or topic of interest. Each session today will be led by an experienced corporate director coach, where you will have the opportunity to get all of your questions answered, and they will provide you with coaching and networking tips, and you really don't want to miss that part.
For sure, you definitely don't. Well, let's get started with our research learnings. Quarterly and annually, 50/50 Women on Boards uses the data provided by our partner, Equilar, to release our Gender Diversity Index key findings, where we analyze the percentage of women on boards nationwide, as well as by state and by industry sector. We also report on the percentage of women selected for new board seats. And based on those who self-identify, we report on the race and ethnicity of all directors. So what did we learn this year here in Minnesota as well as nationally? Well, we're happy to report that we made great progress this year. As you can see on the screen, through the 12-month period ending June 30th, 2021, our 50/50 Women on Boards Gender Diversity Index research reveals that of the 27,000 board seats on the Russell 3000 Index, women now hold almost 7,000, or 25.6% of the corporate board seats. This is a 3-point increase from last year, when the percentage was 22.6%. This is the most significant year-over-year increase we have seen. We are now at the halfway mark to women holding 50% of the corporate board seats. For the Russell 3000 companies headquartered here in Minnesota, women hold 27.4% of the board seats. While that does remain flat to last year, it is almost 2 points above the national average. And not that we're competitive or anything, but we are proud to share that Minnesota ranks 4th amongst the 25 states who each have 20 or more companies as part of the Russell 3000 Index. These 25 states represent 89% of all the companies on the Russell 3000. Way to go, Minnesota. The next metric we look at is gender balance. This is the percentage of companies that have an equal number of men as they do men on the corporate board. And looking at Q2 2021, in comparison to Q4 of 2020, only 7% of the Russell 3000 companies have gender balanced boards. So 215 of the 3,000 companies on the Russell 3000 Index have an equal number of men and women on their boards. It is slightly up from 5%. We do see that companies with 3 or more women on the boards have increased, and then companies with only 2, 1, or no women on the boards have decreased. So we are moving the needle in the right direction. Here in Minnesota, 3 out of 52 companies on the Russell 3000, or 6%, are gender balanced. This is up from 2%. For all companies to be gender balanced in Minnesota, company boards will need to add between 95 to 165 women. The number range depends on whether a woman replaces a male seat on the board or a new seat, is added to the board. Clearly, there are ample board seats for women with Minnesota headquartered companies. Part of our mission is to ensure boards are diverse and that women of color hold at least 20% of all board seats. Out of the total directors who serve on publicly traded boards, unfortunately, only 17% self-report their race and ethnicity. Of the 17% that self-report, only 12% of directors are people of color. This breaks down to 4.5% women and 7.4% men. These results are extremely low and far from our goal of women of color holding 20% of the corporate board seats, which is why the conversations we're hosting and the educational training and awareness programs led by 50/50 Women on Boards are essential to drive future progress. We encourage board directors who are with us today to please self-identify by creating their Equilar Board Edge profile so we can better assess and develop solutions for underrepresented groups. The URL you can see on your screen to the Equilar Board Edge profile will also be put in the chat. So please feel free to take a photo of this slide for future reference. We really do thank you in advance for your help to more accurately understand this very important data.
Thanks, Maureen. Everyone here today shares the mutual desire to ignite change in the boardroom. So what's next? How do we all take action to lead the way and advocate for ourselves and for other women? Maureen and I and the 50/50 Women on Board leadership team ask for your help. It starts with educating ourselves and each other. We are grateful for our panel today that we know will educate and inspire us. And we also offer 2 workshops through 50/50 Women on Board. The Path to the Boardroom for early to mid-career women interested in mapping their future boardroom pursuits. And the second one is Get on Board, which is for board-ready women. Go to 5050wob.com to sign up for one of our upcoming workshops. And secondly, for those currently on boards or in leadership positions, we really urge you to advocate within your own organizations that a diverse pool of candidates is considered for every future board seat and honestly for leadership positions as well. And then third, networking is really the key to landing your first board seat. And we'll talk more about that in our breakouts. We would like to assist in broadening everyone's network today by asking everyone who's willing to network with each other on this call today to please share your LinkedIn profile in the chat. And then lastly, we as 50/50 Women on Boards commit to continually report progress against our objectives of 50% representation by women on boards and 20% representation of women of color on boards. So today, you will hear from an amazing panel moderated by Kevin D. Wright, who has been an unwavering supporter of our work here in Minnesota. And Kevin actually helped us moderate our panel last year, which was fabulous then as well. And I know today it will be again. So he accepted the position today to be our moderator without hesitation. So before I hand it over to Kevin, let me share a little bit of his background. Kevin is the managing partner and CEO of Eris Insights Group, a leadership and diversity and inclusion consultancy. Kevin capitalizes on his 20 years of leadership experience by spearheading organizational change in unpopular businesses to serve as corporate, industry association, and higher education clients in the area of leadership, strategic management, and diversity and inclusion. Kevin serves on multiple boards and advisory boards, including Infinity Systems, Sigma Pi Phi's Beta Mu Boulé Foundation Board, the National Black MBA National Advisory Board, North Point Health and Wellness, and he has also served on the Sunrise Bank Advisory Board. So thanks for joining our conversation today, Kevin, and welcome to our call today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I am excited about today. I hope everyone out there is as well. I'm particularly excited today and encouraged that we actually have not just corporate boards, we have all four types of board directorships represented today. So that's nonprofit, that's private boards, that's public boards, as well as advisory boards. So we'll have a robust conversation this morning. I'm also encouraged by the diversity of our attendees. And just so that we get a little perspective around the attendees, about half of our attendees have been in their careers between 11 and 20 years. And a little bit more than a third are senior leaders, and the rest, somewhere around 15%, just shy of 15%, are early in their careers, which is unbelievably encouraging because they're being thoughtful and thinking ahead. And so without any further ado, what I'd like to do is begin to introduce our esteemed panel this morning. And so first up, we have Brenda Beeler. Brenda is a former president, CEO, and C-suite executive of a digitally focused direct-to-consumer retail brands. She brings an extensive knowledge of B2C and B2B business strategies, transformational customer experience, and strong corporate governance expertise to her corporate board roles. She currently serves on an independent board as an independent board director for Mason Companies, a large multi-channel retailer with a portfolio of 10 e-commerce and catalog businesses. Good morning, Brenda. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine, Kevin. I'm thrilled to be with you today to discuss with all these people this great effort being put forth by so many people in the industries we serve.
Outstanding, outstanding. Next up, we have a Minnesota favorite, one of my favorites for sure, Ms. Kim Nelson. Kim serves on the board of Colgate-Palmolive Company, Cummins, Inc., and Tate Lyle, PLC. Kim retired after a distinguished 30-year career with General Mills as the Senior Vice President of External Relations. Kim was accountable for the corporate brand reputation, consumer relations, issue crisis management, internal and external communications, sustainability, philanthropy, government relations, and industry relations. I'm starting to think that Kim has a clone. Prior, Kim was president of the $1.2 billion snack food division, where she drove double-digit revenue and profit growth. Good morning, Kim. How are you?
Good morning. Great, Kevin. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Next up, we have another Minnesota favorite. We have Miss Nancy Dahl. Ms. Dahl is an experienced director with service in 13 boards over the past 17 years. She currently serves on 5 private corporate boards, which are Knutson Construction, where she's the lead director, Park Industries, EDCO, Dawson Industries, and Collective Measures, formerly Nina Hale. Nancy's expertise spans 5 industries: financial, consumer goods and services, construction and building products, and retail. Nancy is formerly the president and COO of businesses ranging in size from 20 million to 750 million. Good morning, Nancy. How are you?
Good morning, Kevin. I'm awesome and very excited to be here.
Outstanding, outstanding. We're happy to have you. And last but not least, so that I am not the only man on this conversation, we have Mr. James Moman. Good morning, James. James is the Senior Vice President and Chief Equity Officer at 3M. He's responsible for the 3M Gives organization, diversity and inclusion, as well as their social justice efforts, which includes a $50 million social justice fund established in 2020 to drive equitable outcomes in 3M communities. Prior to that, James held several senior HR positions at General Mills, including leading the company's D&I efforts. James currently serves on the board of the Minnesota Children's Museum and 3M Open Board. Good morning, James. How are you?
Morning, Kevin. Great to be here.
Happy to have you. Now I'm going to dispense with sounding like a talk show host, and we're going to get into a conversation. This is going to be exactly that, a conversation. Now, I'll lead off certainly with a question or two for each of you, and we're going to start with Brenda. Our theme this year is leading the way to diverse and gender balanced boards. We applaud you for doing just that. As a CEO or board director, please share with our audience what practices or ideas you have put in place or you've seeded to attract a diverse board.
Oh, thank you, Kevin. That's a perfect question to begin with. On boards where I have served, it really becomes a part of a key strategy in succession planning with your board. So if you think about it, some boards have terms where after, say, 2 or 3 years, they refresh their board. I will tell you the best practices I have seen is when I have served on governance and nominating committees is that there is an ongoing discussion about what are the needs of the business and what diverse candidates could be included in that. So the establishment of a board matrix, a skills and expertise matrix, is always a part of ongoing discussions. But then so we take it beyond just the people we know in our network. That's where the work really comes in to say, we've got to look differently. We've got to look and not just have it be because I know A, B, and C. Candidly, that's how I landed my first board, was someone looked outside their normal network. So to get diverse candidates, you must absolutely do that. And it's upon the chair of the governance and nominating committee to lead that with that committee and the board. And fruitful results will come from that work.
Outstanding. I like to call that making it part of the mission and not just the mission statement, right? So thanks for that example. Nancy, I have a question for you, and I'm particularly interested in your answer. In the US, women have historically been reared to be less assertive, lest they be painted with the B word, bossy. Consequently, women are less apt to be more forward or put themselves out there and what I like to call claim their expertise. Boards seek candidates based on their value-adding expertise, and you have to be seen as the expert. Seen as the expert being a key word here. How can women become better networked and more visible during their careers to be better positioned to be considered for a board opening?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin. And it's really easy in our busy life to say, I'll get to that. I'll get to that. And so what I found helpful is I had goals each year of, how do I expand my network? And anytime I went somewhere, I always tried to walk away with three names of people I'd met, but I didn't know. And I followed them up with breakfast, lunch, dinner, or drinks every single time. My board work started in nonprofit, and I made it a goal to meet with every board member the first year I was on the board for breakfast, lunch, dinner, or drinks. You'll see a theme here. And
I like that theme, Nancy.
Yeah. And so because I think the conversation is more lively when you have food, right? And you're sitting across a table. It's much more like it is here about what we're doing. The other thing I think is really important is you have to decide it matters. Meeting new people can be uncomfortable. And, if I saw people in the news I thought were interesting, I often would call them up and say, I really read this story about you. I think it's really cool. Can we have time, to meet? And, the only thing they can do is say no. And I would tell you, I don't think anyone's ever told me no. Everyone said yes, but you have to make the time to be able to make it happen. So I think that's step one. The other thing I think it is, I often don't make gender comments, except in one area, and it's this one. I think in this whole notion of being prepared for a board and being recognized as an expert, when you look at the statistics, women tend to excel in academics, right? It's what school teaches us. You study, you learn the answer. It's about the answer. And we forget that it's often about the question. And I think that the place to be recognized as the expert is not necessarily because I have to study and know the answer. It's about having the confidence you can figure it out through the series of questions that you ask. And so my best thing of advice is to be confident, gain your confidence in who you are and your ability to figure stuff out, and less about, I don't know the answer, I guess I can't say anything, or I can't check all the boxes, therefore I'm not going forward. So, I think two things. One, you have to make networking a priority. If you seek to be on a board, my board journey started in my late 30s. I saw it as something I really wanted to do. And so it took years of meeting people and talking with them to learn more, and then following up. It wasn't a one and done. I think networking it isn't about just having coffee with someone. It's about having a second time, a third time, a fourth time, and a fifth time. And it's this back and forth. What are you remembering that was interesting to them that you can share? So you build an authentic relationship. That's the kind of networking that I think pays off. One, it's more enjoyable. It makes more life a lot more fun. And two, then you have more tools in your toolkit, if you will, around what the pieces are. So you have to be intentional, and you have to build your confidence in your ability to figure stuff out, because that voice will get recognized.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's outstanding advice. In fact, it really follows in with the focus pillars as they talk about collaborate. Women, 50-50 women on boards, talks about wanting to collaborate, and it's absolutely essential. And I think it's one of the knowledge areas specifically around being relational and having relationships in order to be successful on boards. And so I think that's very cogent feedback for our audience. My next question is going to go to you, Kim. Today, there's a much greater focus on companies' ESG initiatives or environmental, social, and governance. What social or governance practices have you witnessed or put into place to help elevate diversity and women to leadership roles or for board consideration?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. And thanks for having me be a part of this conversation. I think the biggest areas of social practices put in place has been around the work that takes place on boards in the nominating and governance committee. And I think, and also I'd say in the talent management and compensation as well. So there are practices that are all about who are we hiring? Do we have equity in how we manage our talent in our company? And not just equity of pay, but equity of opportunity. So this is something that I've seen board members advocate for, and I myself have been a part of advocating for making sure companies have their house in order. And then I think the other piece is on the governance, the non-governance is, like I think Brenda was saying, making sure that as you identify the skills that you're going to need going forward, that it's not just who is the expert in cybersecurity or who has this background that we're looking for that's functionally deep, but it's trying to insist on finding candidates that have other aspects that can stimulate the thinking of the board and not just have the same sort of general background represented again and again and again and again on the board. So those are the two places that, I've seen those best practices brought forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim. Outstanding. We'll dig in a little bit more so we can hear some more stories about exactly how that transpires. We know that, with some 8 meetings a year, it can get rather difficult. In fact, if you add it up, you probably get to ask, if you go back to Nancy talking about asking the question, as a board director, you probably get to ask about 10 to 12 questions a year. So we have to be really strategic about what questions we're going to answer, we're going to ask. James, question for you. We know many women, particularly women of color and people from underrepresented groups, get stuck in middle management positions. How are you providing a path for early to mid-career women to advance in their careers in order to feed the board director pipeline?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. It's a great question. And, first I'll just start with, it really is about inflow of talent. So before we even get to the part about retaining and developing, making sure our own organizations have representation of women of color is really, really critically important. And so that's a big part of the focus and effort we have at 3M as we try to deliver on our diversity ambitions, is just making sure that the inflow of women of color in our own organization is where it should be and is representative and reflective of the markets in which we work. But then once you get folks in there, how do you, to your point, how do you make sure that they're advancing through the organization, that they're having some level of success? And I think, to me, there's a couple things. Number one, I talked about investment and development. For us, it's really critically important that we're able to identify talent that we has the ability to advance through the organization and make the right investments in that talent to make sure that they achieve their full potential in our organization. So that's one. Number two, making sure that we understand from a leadership perspective, what type of manager is going to allow this individual to be successful, and what type of roles do they need to round out their experiences at 3M? Again, we're a science-based organization, so what are the critical experiences that any employee needs, but how do we make sure when we look at our underrepresented populations, in particular women of color, they're getting the right experiences that are going to make them competitive candidates for senior leadership positions moving forward. And then also, how do you create the right culture? And for us, a big part of that is our employee resource networks. We talk a lot about that. That's how you find a sense of safety and community. How do we leverage those employee resource networks to make sure that these employees feel like they've got a place and a sense of belonging at 3M, both in the workplace, but also outside of the workplace? All of that leads us to a place where we can actually deliver on the promise of this diverse talent, making sure that we position them in a way that they're going to be able to achieve their full potential.
That leads me, my head is going in a million different directions after hearing each of you answer the questions. I think what I pose to the group and allow whomever wants to lean in on the question, as a result of having more diverse boards, and we know that we're not where we want to be, but we're certainly striving to get to where we want to be, right? As a result of that, what robust discussions or ideas have emerged in the board that maybe previously wouldn't happen? And this may be something that's occurred as a result of the last 18 months or the last 2 years of experiences. Certainly you are in a very interesting perspective because of where you are, geographically and what's happened in that area. So talk to me a little bit about, some of the robust conversations that are happening these days in the boardrooms and outside of the boardrooms that maybe wouldn't have happened, call it 24 months ago.
I can jump in on one experience that was really exciting that I've had a chance to be a part of. This is on my Tate & Lyle board, which is a British board. And, most of the leadership is UK based, London based. So, they're British, they're not American, but their footprint is in the US. And so when we talk about ethnic diversity, there's just a different frame. And yet they have so many employees that are in our American frame. And one of the things that I feel I was able to help that organization see is they were sort of reacting to George Floyd and trying to figure out what was going on and what they needed to do to make sure they were taking into account the 80% of their footprint that wasn't in UK, and essentially was able to advocate for and pour gasoline on the fire of momentum for standing up a DEI practice and literally hiring, staffing, VP level, somebody who could help steward the best practices in the DEI space for the company globally. And they didn't have that. And maybe it would have happened without myself and others who were also champions. But that's a very explicit example of whoever's around the table has the opportunity to share what they know. And this is a company in the food industry, but on the supplier side, and having grown up on their customer side and understanding all of those companies have very advanced DEI practices, and being able to bring that perspective to them, to the table, that they should, be thinking about their customers and, having a diverse workforce that, can bring its highest and best to work every day is something that is important to their customers. Is it important to them? So that's an example of the difference that we can make around the table.
Outstanding. Anyone else have any sort of interesting conversations that they've had here recently that maybe they wouldn't have had, 18 months, 24 months ago? And it could be George Floyd, it could be pandemic. Both of those things have certainly driven, what's happening in our boardroom.
Kevin, I'll jump in. I'll just do two quickly. One, to play off of what Kim said. In one of the boards I was on after the George Floyd, as you're trying to just figure it out, to use Kim's word, figure out what's really going on. Because we had a diverse board, there was a very candid conversation of what it meant to be a Black male in America. because of the people that were on the board. And so it took something that you could have dismissed in the media of, oh, that just happened there, I don't have to deal with it, to the guy or gal sitting right next to you about what it meant to be there. The same kind of conversation happened with some of the first generation immigrant folks that would get stopped at various places. And when incidents would happen, their kids would call and say, are you going to be safe? Can you get home? And so there was a much deeper personal conversation that happened as a result of having diversity, because it was in your network. It was sitting right next to you, and you just never would have had that conversation if you hadn't had that. That would be one. And the second one.
Can I stick a pin in that real quickly before you go to the second one? Because I want to raise awareness and make certain that everyone on the call got this, right? Because most of us know the business case for diversity, right? I mean, everyone talks about it, everyone talks about the research, but the mere fact is, if you think about boards and this notion of crisis management and crisis leadership and the ability for you to have a real in-depth conversation with a level of awareness and realization firsthand from a diverse individual in the board is very valuable for a corporation. And so, that might be fodder or commentary for our more senior career individuals that are ready to go into a board. But I think that's something that, maybe tangentially touched on when we talk about the value proposition of having a diverse board. But that's a very real world example of how you can actually manage through crisis management, crisis leadership better having someone diverse on your board. Not to mention, we all know that those walls between, say, board leadership and management of the corporation, I would say in the past 24 months have come down a little bit. The board sort of starts to seep into the management a little bit. I'm sorry, Nancy, give us your second.
No, I think, it was a very real conversation that, people felt uncomfortable. It's like, my gosh, I'm sitting right next to this. I didn't know, right? It made it personal. So to your point, the second one, again, plays off some of what Kim talked about in the NomGov. But as you look at as a board around leadership and succession, a lot of times boards will tend to focus about the CEO succession or the officer succession, maybe a critical role succession. There isn't a lot of discussion about middle management and what's really happening. And I think a lot of things die in middle management. The corporation can say, we're going to go do this, and then middle management doesn't embrace it. And so then you wonder, to James's point, where did all these great people that came in, they're leaving the organization. Why? And, I think that the board started to go deeper, not in fingers in getting into management matters, but really from a board perspective, asking some detailed questions about what's going on there around retention, around performance underneath management. What are we really doing in that pipeline that James talked about earlier to really make sure that we've got an accepting culture, that we're making sure we're not putting barriers in play. And so it began the conversation. I can't tell you it's over. It's just begun. But to Kim's point, both the NomGov and the board can, by deciding it matters, can have a sense of curiosity and a sense of priority for wanting to get answers to things that causes management to think more deeply about how they do business. And one of the jobs of the board, the three functions are governance, oversight, and fit for the future. Where are you going? And so it's the board's job to help raise the bar. And if the board doesn't decide it matters by asking questions, management isn't going to decide it matters. It's going to be more difficult. So I think the tone can get set at the top by the board deciding it matters.
Hey, Kevin, can I piggyback on that?
Absolutely.
The one thing that I would add that I think has changed in the last year plus is, oftentimes when we have issues of diversity related challenges or crises on the board, oftentimes we turn to the person that reflects that diversity to help us define the answers and the solutions. And I think in the last year, what a lot of boards have realized is it's everybody's job, regardless of whether you're the Black woman on the board or the Black man or the immigrant. It is everybody on the board's job to have a purview and a lens into some of the diversity challenges that our corporations face. And I think that's been a welcome change and progress that we've made is, again, everybody showing up to the table with perspective, with learning, with education and insight that's going to add value to how we move this work forward.
I think, James, if we can make the diversity about the thinking, right, not just the outside packaging, check the box, I have one of those, 2 of these, 5 of that, I think the deeper the conversation goes around that, then everybody owns it, to your point, which is where we have to be.
I agree with that, Nancy. I think where the challenge comes sometimes is we think about it in a very bifurcated nature. We say either we're going to think about it based on your presentation and your package, right? Are you LGBTQ plus? Are you African American? Are you Latino, right? As opposed to when oftentimes you talk to directors and that notion of diverse thinking, it becomes not a real consideration for the package. And what I mean by that is I had one large medical organization whom had a 40-person diversity committee, large hospital, multiple hospital network, 40-person diversity committee, right? And they were very diverse in thinking, not one person of color in those 40 people. And so I think we have to, it can't be an either or. I really do think that we have to push on that notion of both, the both and, right?
Yep.
Yeah, this is a very robust conversation, and it leads me to the question that's sort of being asked in boardrooms, right? And that is, what's the role of the corporation? Is it to maximize shareholder value, or is it to maximize shareholder welfare? And that's an interesting question that, quite frankly, I'm grappling a bit with, right? Because if it's just value, and it's all monetarily driven, but that's not sort of where we've been in the past. Call it 24 months, if you will. So what are you seeing in your organizations or sectors that maybe answer one of those two questions, whether it's really about the shareholder value or is it about shareholder welfare, which is a little different? One, I think, is short-term view. The other is long-term view.
Well,
Go ahead, Brenda.
I'll start with the perspective from private, because I serve on private boards. Whether public or private, it all begins with the conversation, and it is where you take it from that point that will really get a result. And I will tell you, in the private sector, the boards that I'm a part of, their values are very much, yes, it's delivering to the shareholders, but the stakeholders in the community that we live and serve are equally as important. And if you look at the advances in the public sector of key leaders in the Business Roundtable, they are clearly putting forth and signing their name, and hopefully, I say hopefully because I think it takes time. It's one thing to say, it's another to really take action, but to really look at a greater sense beyond the shareholder. But in the private sector, I see that there is both short and long term for the wellness of all.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and, Brenda, exactly what you're saying, that I think the BRT, the Business Roundtable Declaration, that it isn't anymore the purpose of the company is just to serve the interest of shareholders, but it is to serve the interests of stakeholders. And, this was a huge deal, very seminal. And I think it sort of underscores the recognition that in order to serve the long-term interests of shareholders, you will need society's permission. And in order to get that permission, you need to be a responsible member of society. And, by society, I mean, stakeholders include your employees, how you treat the people that work for you. That's risen to the fore, as well as, non-governmental organizations that might not like that you're supporting, you don't care about what's happening with labor in your supply chain, human rights in the supply chain, or sustainability, or these types of issues. So I think there is a dawning recognition that it's just got to be broader. And even if you believe that it's just about the shareholder, in order to serve the interest of the shareholder long term, you are going to have to be more accountable for the impacts of your business on your employees and society and other stakeholders.
I couldn't agree more. In light of that, James, talk to us a little bit about how maybe 3M thinks about the notion of stakeholder as opposed to shareholder. Talk to us a little bit about that within 3M, and how does that sort of manifest itself? And how do we see that as maybe external individuals, and specifically as we prepare and think about our future and getting on boards, certainly we need to identify those companies that are have an eye towards society, right? And so and sort of align with us from an ESG perspective. Talk to us a little bit about 3M and how we might see that manifestation there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big part of my job responsibilities. I have responsibility for the S in ESG, and we exclusively talk about stakeholder management and the expectations of those stakeholders ratcheting up quite a bit in the last 18 months. And so we have to meet those expectations. And to Kim's point, shareholders are one of those stakeholders, but they're not the only stakeholder. And so again, customers, employees, government agencies, and the like, we're really trying to manage the delicate balance between all of these stakeholders, but we know they have an expectation for us to do better, do more in the social space. And one of the things that, we talk a lot about is we've got to prioritize where we're going to be able to have our impact. You can't do everything. So prioritization is a really critical exercise for us as we try to meet the needs of all those stakeholders, and then communicating it. One of the things that we did this year for the first time is we issued our first ever diversity, equity, inclusion report. That's going to become table stakes to manage the expectations of your stakeholders, is them having transparency to the data and the information that they expect to see. So again, for us, it is a big part of what I do on a day-to-day basis. And I think expectations moving forward are just going to be more and more.
Do you think there's an opportunity for companies to work together? I mean, I'm looking at Brenda and Nancy and Kim and James. You all work with a number of corporations, whether that be as director or leading foundation and the like. Is there an opportunity for companies to sort of cross-pollinate around this whole idea of diverse directors and the like? Is there an opportunity there?
I think that companies for sure can support organizations that help build capacity and pipeline for all of them that they're all looking for. They're wanting this. I mean, I think even organizations like Women on Boards, and there's a long list of them that are seeking to build capacity and pipeline, are organizations they'll all source talent from, either at the boardroom or within their management. So there are any number of organizations that do what James was talking about earlier. He was talking about employee resource groups that create community, provide information, knowledge, help with navigation of an organization. Well, that's all happening outside of companies too, and in various, in various groupings of employees. And I think that the extent to which Minnesota has a long tradition of partnering on things like National Black MBA for Minnesota, some of the recruiting even, I don't know if they're still doing it, James, you could speak to it, but going out to some of these organizations as Minnesota versus as just individual companies to sell the place. So yeah, I think there's always room for collaboration in these spaces.
Absolutely. So, we're getting down really close to that bewitching hour, and I want to take a few minutes and have you, in a minute and a half or less, I want you to tell me, as you sit as a director on these boards, whether that be nonprofit, private, or public, what would you have told your younger self in order to be better prepared, more equipped as a director today? And we'll start with Brenda.
Okay. I have always believed that my career is a book, and I want it to be a great novel where every chapter there's twists and turns, and I have new learnings. Many times I've reflected and I said, was that last chapter a good chapter? Well, I learned A, B, and C, and I expanded my network. It was a good chapter. So what I would tell myself is start that book early. And I'm thrilled with everything that this organization is doing. Do it early. in your career because you have a long career and it's a big, big book. It's over 500 pages, Kevin. So, invest time in making the best book possible.
Will you have an audible version of that?
I would like Nancy to actually keep Nancy narrate it. She has a better voice.
I'll take that job.
Well, speaking of Nancy, tell me in a minute and a half or less, what would you tell a younger Nancy?
Oh gosh. I would say two things. One is be confident in your ability to figure it out. Because there's sort of this, I have to rush and get this, and learn to be patient. There is wisdom in being patient and, being more noticing of what's around you. And I think learning that the resources that many times we need to go forward are within us, not outside of us. And, that's a skill I think that we all learn as we get older. So I don't know that my younger self would have listened, to be frank, but that's what I would have told her.
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy. How about you, James?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll start with what a privilege it is to serve on any board. It is the highest of leadership of any respective organization. And I think for me, it can be sometimes daunting and overwhelming, and you get in spaces and you assume you need to fit in. And, what I would encourage my younger self is find that loud, authentic voice with those unique experiences that I've had and make sure they're voiced and shared in those spaces. There aren't a lot of me in those spaces. My unique perspective is really, really valuable. So finding that voice to not assimilate and get along, but to truly lead and voice that unique perspective.
Thank you. Yeah, clearly you walking into a boardroom in many instances will change that boardroom, right?
Yep.
Just by your virtual presence.
Yep.
And last but not least, Kim.
Yeah, I think what I would tell my younger self as relates to board service in particular is to be thinking about it. I mean, I really wasn't thinking about board service in my career. I never imagined that. I was just trying to do my career. I mean, I was just trying to, be successful at General Mills. And it really wasn't until I began approaching retirement that I even thought about board service. And, it was fine. I had done some things that prepared me, but there could have, if I had been a little more intentional, I might have gotten into board work, for-profit board work, maybe 5 years before I retired versus after I retired. I would have advice to not be afraid to do different things. I had a 23-year career running P&Ls. And then I took a big leap into this, much more, diverse job, ESG oriented job that was non-P&L. And that ended up being my secret sauce as a board recruit. That's what people really liked, is the combination. So that's what I would say. And then as far as just about yourself, I would go where James was going and trust yourself, be yourself. Especially, again, I'm the double, the ethnic diversity and gender diversity, and we're never going to be what is expected and the norm. So we're always going to do it differently. And we need to lean into that as our superpower versus keep trying to fit into the round hole. It's like we're square peg and we're going to do things our way and it's going to be fabulous. And that stands true whether it's in a corporate setting or on a board. So lean into what makes you unique and special and learn how to manage through fear and just trust yourself that you're going to be just fine.
Thank you. As a husband, having a wife, 2 daughters, and a granddaughter, I've come to realize that they tend to have the answers, and so I think that's very good feedback. The last thing I'll say, and in closing, is as people think about taking on board or trying to find their way into a directorship, one piece of advice that I got was really around there being 5 intelligences. as you think about your career and your experiences, and one being financial, being able to take a look at a balance sheet, an income statement, and be able to draw some conclusions from that. Another being strategic, and that's changing, that's ever changing, given where we are as a nation and as a world with post George Floyd, and we've seen the movement in our world as a result of that, not just in this country, but across the world, the pandemic and how that's impacted us. And strategically, what does that mean for a board? Being relational, understanding, who are those individuals that sit on the board with you and that you can align with and that you don't align with, and being able to have a relationship to gain from those individuals, and what role will you play? And then ultimately, what is the culture of the board and the organization? The last thing that I often say when I talk with senior leaders in all of these roles is that we have to give up the notion that we have to be right, and we have to give up, much to what Nancy said earlier, is to give up the notion that we have to have the answer. Lastly, I'll say, to paraphrase what each of you have provided in terms of what you should do as you think about becoming a director: network and expand your network. Call on people, reach out. I think Nancy said drinks, breakfast, or dinner. I like those. I like all three of those. Go outside of your network is what Brenda said, right? Get beyond your typical walls that you sort of operate in order to identify candidates to solve for your director needs, and understand that we need more than just one diverse applicant. And diverse can be diverse of thinking, as well as the packaging or gender, if you will, or sexual preference. And then work on your nominating and governance committees in order to ensure that the slate is diverse. Think about, in the words of James, think about the inflows of the actual employee and the opportunity that talent has to continue to grow, so that they're in position to be thought of as a board director, or thought of as being positioned to be ready to be a board director. Said succinctly, create the right culture. And then finally, I think you do what we do here. Bring yourself to these sorts of events, the 50-50 Women on Boards, and gain the knowledge and gain from Brenda and Kim and Nancy and James. And honestly, I'll tell you, it doesn't end here. As Nancy indicated, she's never gotten a no. And so I don't think there's anything wrong if you're attending here and you're listening here. Reach out to myself or Nancy or Brenda or Kim or James, and offer coffee or lunch or dinner. It's just, I like to say it's 50 minutes. That's about all it is, right? You can ask some questions. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for engaging in this informative conversation, and for 50-50 Women on Boards leading the way. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Wow, that was really, really terrific. Thank you so much for all of your thought-provoking and inspiring conversation. And thanks to Kevin for your great insights as well. So Maureen, what do you think? What was your biggest takeaway?
Well, I want to say thank you too to all the panelists and to Kevin. I think they all did a fantastic job. I think for me, I always, one of the things that stand out is many times sort of, some of the most simple pieces of advice. I think what James and what Kim talked about really stood out to me in terms of, right, as we're all want to be leaders in our organization, leaders in our community, and aspiring to be on a corporate board, is really sort of identifying and leaning into what your superpower is, right? We all have gotten to positions because of, unique attributes or unique contributions that we've made. And so be proud of those and lean into those. And if corporate board is what you're trying to do, leverage those unique assets, and that will be rewarded. We know the corporate board journey isn't a journey that's a short journey. It takes a long time. So I think everyone attending today has, so many, great strengths and great attributes. So lean into those and find your superpower and leverage that to get onto the board. I think that's what really kind of stood out to me. How about you?
Awesome. Well, I love Kevin's comment at the end talking about breakfast, lunch, drinks, or dinner, whatever works. I think that is really great to be super intentional about your networking, right? and come away from any event that you attend knowing 3 new people and
Right.
follow up with those people, because really you never know where that's going to go.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
So that was a
Exactly.
great tip.
Good. Well, I think we want to move to breakouts right
Yep.
now. So,
Yep. So we hope that everyone's enjoyed watching our conversation as much as Maureen and I have. And it would be great if each of you could share in the chat your one biggest takeaway today and continue that conversation. So let's shift gears, and we're going to talk about the next segment of our program today, our breakout conversations. We encourage you to stick with us and join others in the call today that have similar interests and get all of your questions answered by our director coaches coming up here. And before we head over there, we would like to introduce you to our experienced group of 6 director coaches. Each of you will be paired with one of these coaches based on your selections during registration. And you can see our director coaches on screen right now. Susan Morisato is the former president of Insurance Solutions at United Healthcare, and she and I worked together for many years. And she currently serves on the corporate board of LiveVox. Diana Purcell has over 20 years of experience as a strategic and operational chief financial officer for premier consumer brands such as iMedia Brands, Cooper's Hawk Winery and Restaurants, and Famous Dave's of America. She serves on the corporate board of Ocean Power Technologies. Allie Wing, who was also with us as a panelist last year, is the CEO of Joywell Foods, a food, technology, and consumer goods company. And she serves on the public and corporate board at Casey's General Stores. And then joining us again in our breakout sessions is Brenda Beeler, Nancy Dahl, and Kevin Wright, who you met earlier. So now for those important instructions. To access your breakout room, look over to the left side of your screen and click on Agenda. And then on your agenda, you will see your breakout room. And then you click into the session and click on Join Now. And then that's how you'll access your breakout room. So it should be pretty straightforward. If you have any questions about accessing your breakout room, please go to the Help Center, which is located to the left of your screen, or email events@5050WOB. So as your Minnesota co-chairs, we've been honored to be with you here today for this really critical conversation.
absolutely. Thank you to everyone. Thank you all again. And let's continue to lead the way to diverse and gender balanced boards here in Minnesota.
So you all ready? Let's head over to our breakout rooms and we'll see you all in there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.